Hey everyone, it's Laura. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be doing a major cook with me, making enough meals for my family of 7 for the entire month. And so I thought I would obviously grab the camera and take it around and just show you guys my process. So in this video, I'm gonna be showing you me planning and just coming up with the menu plan, prepping and just getting a few of the things ready, and then the full-blown day, which it took an entire day to get everything completely cooked and ready to go. And so I'm going to take you along. I hope you guys enjoy this and I hope it gives you some meal inspiration. This is obviously going to be a lot of cooking inspiration. So if you are in the kitchen and cooking today, you can just play the video and watch me cook while you cook. All right, so let's get into the video. Before getting into the kitchen, it took a lot of planning to figure out what freezer meals I wanted to make and to get my monthly meal plan planned out. So I started off by just getting on the computer and searching different freezer meals, and I just wrote down the ones that sounded good for me and for my family and just started putting them on paper. After I had everything that I wanted to make on paper, I started kind of organizing it into the way that I would want to make it, not necessarily in the order that we might eat it, but in the easiest way to make it, so putting, like things kind of together so that after I had certain things out, I could just jump right into the other things to start making it. After I checked on inventory in the pantry, I headed down to my deep freezer. We have a lot of meat right now. We have a couple of deer that my husband got from hunting, and then we also have a whole hog that we just got from my sister's farm. And so all of the meat I had in the freezer were about all the meat that I needed for all of these meals. So I pulled out the different meat that I needed and stuck it in the fridge to start defrosting it. After I had everything checked, I headed to the store to get the rest of the things I needed in order to start my cooking day. Before I started cooking any meals, I had to prep a lot of things. So the first thing I did was I browned a bunch of meat. This is actually all deer meat, but you can also be replaced with beef. And this is just the ground meat that I'm going to be using in some of my recipes. So I threw in about 6 pounds at a time and just started browning that meat. After I had some meat browned, I got my Instapot going to work because I had a lot of things I wanted to make in there. I started off by making a bunch of black beans because I'm going to be using those in several of my recipes, and I find that making them in my Instapot is the fastest way to do that. I can get a ton of beans made from raw or dry beans, I guess, and have them cooked up in just about 20 minutes in my Instapot. After my beans were done, I took those out and I immediately put in a whole chicken into my Instapot. Once my whole chicken was done, I pulled that out and I put in 2 pork roasts. I didn't even drain any of the water. I just stuck it in there, all the juices from the meat, and make it taste really good. So it had that nice chicken broth in there to cook my pork roast in. So I stuck those in and got those cooking as well. Next, I headed over to the stove and I made up a bunch of rice. I had a bunch of meals that were going to require some rice, so I just got that going. And at the same time, I also had some water boiling for some noodles and made up some noodles. I also had to have some broth made. I actually made this broth the day before my cooking day so I wouldn't have to use up my Instapot, because I like to also make my broth in my Instapot. So now that I have all my broth made, my meat cooked, my noodles and my rice, my beans made, it is time to jump in to the different recipes that I am making for this monthly meal plan. So first up, I am making some teriyaki chicken, and for this one I'm using some chicken tenderloin tenderloins that I do not have cooked. I'm making this just raw. So I cut up the chicken tenderloins and then I made a marinade or a sauce to put in with it. I am using a teriyaki sauce that I got from my Thrive Market order. That is all good ingredients. I'm adding in some coconut aminos and some spices, and I'm putting this all just straight in a Ziploc bag, and then I will freeze it. And when it's time to cook, I'll defrost it, just throw this in my cast iron skillet and kind of sear it and cook it up, and then serve this over some rice and some roasted broccoli. The second meal I made was some chili. So for this one, I started off by dicing up some onions and some peppers. I then got a Ziploc bag and labeled it chili. I added in some of my cooked beans, my raw vegetables, some canned tomatoes, all of my chili spices, and some of the meat that I already had cooked. This one should be enough for 2 meals. I stuffed the bag as full as I can. My family loves chili, and this is a super easy one. I will just defrost it and then pour it into my Dutch oven and warm it up. But like I said, this should be enough to feed our family twice. For the third meal, I am making a lasagna. So I'm just using a foil throwaway container to freeze it in. And I just start off by pouring in my sauce. I have some einkorn noodles from Thrive Market, a little ricotta cheese. Again, I'm using that meat that I already have cooked, cheese, and I'm just layering this all into the pan. Now also, this one will probably be 2 meals for us. This is very heavy when I was finished because I put so many layers in there. But I'm going to cover this in foil and then put the lid on, and I will freeze this. And then when I pull it out, let it defrost, and then I'll just bake it until all the ingredients are nice and bubbly, probably about an hour. For the fourth meal, I'm making a vegetable beef soup. So I'm starting off by peeling some carrots and dicing up the carrots, celery, and some onions. I'm then going to put the raw vegetables into my Ziploc bag. I'm adding in some of the cooked beef that I keep saying beef, this is actually deer, but it can be substituted for beef or deer, it's kind of the same thing. Putting in the meat that I already have cooked, I added in a bag of frozen mixed vegetables, and then I'm pouring in some of my bone broth that I had made. Now, I read that you can freeze potatoes, but it's best to first have them cooked slightly. So that's why I put my potatoes into the saucepan and I just boiled them for just a couple of minutes and then added them into the bag. So the same as the other ones, I'm just going to lay this flat in the freezer and freeze it. And then when it's time to eat, I will defrost it and then just add it all into a big soup pot to warm it up. For the next meal, I'm going to make a big meatloaf. So I'm starting off by dicing up some bell pepper, some celery, onions. I'm going to mince up some garlic. And And then I'm going to add it into my meat. Now for this one, I'm using raw meat. I like to add in a couple eggs and some breadcrumbs. And I also like adding in salsa. It just gives your meatloaf a really good flavor. Once I had everything in, I mixed it all up, formed it into a loaf, and put it into a pan to freeze. For this one, I will just defrost it, bake it for about 40 minutes. When I go to bake this, I'll add some potatoes in the oven to make some baked potatoes and maybe steam up some vegetables as well. For the sixth meal, I'm making some steak fajitas. So I'm just going to slice up some bell peppers, an onion, and some steaks. I'm just going to put it into a bag, add a little bit of coconut aminos, some apple cider vinegar, and a little bit of spices. Shake this up, and then whenever it's time to eat, I will just pour the contents of the bag into my cast iron skillet, warm it all up, sear the meat, and once everything's cooked, this will be ready to serve either over a bed of lettuce or in a tortilla or over chips or however you like to eat fajitas. And the first meal I'm going to make with my chicken is a chicken noodle soup. For the soup, I'm going to dice up some celery, carrots, and onions. I'm going to add that with the shredded chicken to a bag and some broth. And then when I go to cook, I will pour all this into a big stock pot, add in a couple cups of egg noodles, bring it to a boil, and while my vegetables are getting tender, my noodles will also be cooking, and then the chicken noodle soup will be ready. The next meal I'm going to be making with my chicken is a chicken wild rice soup. I'm starting off by melting some butter in my Dutch oven and sauteing some carrots and celery. Once the vegetables were sauteed, I added in some more of that bone broth, a little bit of flour, thicken up the soup. I then added in a couple of cups of wild rice and just stirred that in. And then I added in the shredded chicken. I just put the lid on this, let it come to a boil, and then lowered it to a simmer and let everything cook through. Once it was finished, I added in a little bit of cream, stirred it in, and then I'm going to also just put this in a Ziploc bag. Again, this one will probably be enough for 2 meals. This was a pretty full, it was a full pot. It filled up my Dutch oven completely, so I think this will feed my family twice. I'm gonna freeze this, and then whenever it's time to eat, I will just need to defrost this. Everything is cooked in this one, so I'll just have to re-warm it up and then serve it. The next recipe I'm going to make is a taco soup. So I started off by dicing up some onions. I'm going to be using some of those beans that I had cooked, some of that meat that I had cooked, add in some frozen corn, some tomatoes, and a lot of different spices. Then I topped the bag off with some broth, and this is ready to freeze. When I go to serve this, I will top it with some tortilla chips, cheese, sour cream, and some fresh avocados. The next meal I'm making is a goulash. So I started off by shredding some cheese, So for this one, I'm just adding some onions, some of that cooked beef, tomatoes, some marinara sauce, a little bit of broth, and some of those noodles that I had made, and some cheese. Now for this one, I will freeze it, and whenever I go to cook this, I can either pour it into my Dutch oven or into a casserole dish, bake it up, maybe top it with a little more cheese, and this will be ready to eat. The next recipe I'm making is a creamy rice and bean soup. For this one, I'm actually using some browned sausage that I also had cooking on the stove. I forgot to show that part, but I did make a couple pounds of brown sausage. I'm adding that in with all of my vegetables, a little bit of tomato paste, and some rice and beans. Top it off with a little bit of broth, and this makes a really delicious creamy soup. For the next meal, I'm doing some stuffed peppers. So I started off just by cutting the tops off my peppers and getting the seeds out of the middle. I then mixed all of the ingredients to stuff the peppers with in a bowl. So some rice, some pork sausage, a little bit of salsa, and that's what I'm going to use to stuff my pepper. Once the peppers were stuffed, I topped them with cheese, and then I just covered this pan with some foil, and I'll stick this in the freezer. Whenever we're ready to eat it, I will pull it out and just stick it in the oven and warm it up, and this will be ready to serve. By this point, my pork was finished cooking, and so just like the chicken, I'm shredding this all apart. I love making my meat in my Instapot because it gets nice and tender and makes great meat for any type of like soups or burritos or pulled pork sandwiches, things such as that. So for the pork tacos, I'm just using some tortillas, and I'm topping the tacos with the meat and some cheese, some salsa, and just all your favorite taco toppings. Obviously, I'm going to wait for anything like lettuce or cilantro, fresh lime. I'll add that in later when I serve it. I just rolled these up, wrapped them in some foil, and put them in a bag, and I stuck them in the freezer. When it's time to eat these, I'll just take the foil off, put them into a pan, and warm them up, and they'll be ready to eat. Now, if you want to, you can even top these with some cheese sauce to make kind of like an enchilada. And then, like I said, when they're finished, you can add some fresh lettuce and cilantro, avocados. This will make a really easy meal later on because I already have the meat and everything else already cooked. The next meal is a buffalo chicken chili. For this one, I'm just using some of that shredded chicken, some buffalo sauce, along with a little bit of hot sauce to mix this up. Now, my kids like things spicy, so they should be okay with this. And then I'm adding in some beans and some broth, a little bit of tomatoes, and this makes a really delicious chicken chili with a little bit of a spicy flavor. So if you like spicy, you guys should try this one out. I just Googled this recipe and found some different ones and just kind of pieced it together with what ingredients I had on hand. For the next one, I am just making some homemade barbecue sauce to pour over top some shredded pulled pork. And then when I go to serve this, I'll just pull it out, warm up the meat with the barbecue sauce, make some homemade buns, and serve this on those for some easy pulled pork sandwiches, or you could even use this to make a pulled pork nachos or salad. But just because I had some leftover pulled pork from the roast that I did, I decided to make a big pot of homemade barbecue sauce to pour over this, and that will make a really easy meal or two probably for my family because this is a lot of meat, and like I said, I can make sandwiches with it, nachos, or even salad. The next meal I'm making is a round steaks and gravy. I'm choosing to do a white gravy with this. So I'm making it all in my Dutch oven. I'm starting off by just melting some butter, adding in some onion. And once the onions were soft, I sprinkled them with some flour and added in some cream and stirred it up to make a nice thick white gravy. While the gravy was simmering, I tenderized my round steaks with a meat tenderizer, and then I just placed the round steaks into the gravy and smothered them under the gravy, and then I slow cooked this in the oven. Once it was finished and cooled, I poured it into a freezer safe bag, and I will freeze this, and whenever we are ready to eat this, I can just defrost it and pour it back into my Dutch oven and warm it up. And this would be really good to serve with some mashed potatoes and some maybe roasted or steamed vegetables. The last meal I'm making is a Mexican chicken skillet. So I'm starting off by sauteing some onions and minced garlic in some butter. Once the vegetables were soft, I added in the cooked chicken and the rest of the beans that I had and some salsa. Now I just stirred all this up, and when I go to serve this, I will pour it into my cast iron skillet, add in a cup of frozen corn, and top it with cheese. And this makes a really delicious meal. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you some good meal inspiration and some ideas. I have done some freezer meals before, but this is the first time that I've done some really big batch cooking, and I'm really looking forward to just being able to grab a bag of food out of the freezer, defrost it and warm it up, and not have to be in the kitchen cooking a ton for the next month. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. I get out a new video every single week.